Hey, it's Caleb from Brownells here, and in today's video we're going to be cleaning up a Remington 870. This one's a little bit different because the whole premise of this is kind of what to do if you've inherited a gun or something like that. Something similar, somebody gave you a gun, it has a lot of sentimental value, and you want to clean it up and kind of make it usable, whether it be usable or not, but without damaging any of the finish or anything like that. And the reason I say that is because, like, check out this old Remington 870 Wingmaster, for example. This was my dad's shotgun, and he actually gave it to me last Father's Day. And we had a video on it not too long ago, actually. We're kind of like what to do if you inherited a gun. And we talked about it a little bit. As I mentioned in that video, I'm going to go through cleaning it up and show you how to just get it really nice and clean and preserved without damaging any of the, I want to call it the character, because I mean, of course I could just strip this gun completely down, refinish the stocks, re-blue the receiver and barrel, and have an almost brand new looking shotgun, but I don't want to do that. What I want to do is preserve all the, like, there's wear and tear on this gun from just this thing being carried squirrel hunting and stuff like that, and I want to keep all that visible. I say visible, I don't want to put any kind of bluing or coating or anything on it, but I do want to clean it up and get some of this rust, neutralize it, remove as much of it as I can so that it doesn't continue to rust, and just kind of clean it and do an overall check just to make sure everything's going to keep functioning in the future, so that this is something I can also pass down to my kids in the future. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. We already did the most important step, of course, which was make sure it is in fact unloaded. And before I start disassembling this gun, I just want to go over some of the things we're going to be using. We're going to use some quadrupolate steel wool, some gun oil in the form of rim oil, as well as the Wilson Combat Universal Oil, and of course some Hoppy's number 9. You don't have to use these products. You can use whatever your favorite cleaning product is. You don't, like I said, you don't have to use these. These are just some of my favorites for general firearm maintenance, so that's what I'm going to use. Alright, now also, I do have some Remington specific tools. And this applies, like, this process applies to pretty much any firearm almost. But like I said, I'm doing a Remington 870, so I do have some Remington specific tools, like the Forend wrench. And this one necessarily isn't a Remington specific tool, but it's a shotgun specific tool. This is for getting the plug out of the magazine tubes, or the retainer, the spring retainer. I'll show you how to use that when we get there. I have some acid brushes, which are just these really affordable nylon type brushes here. All-purpose brush, shotgun cleaning rod and brushes for the barrel. I'll get to those later as well. And then some pipe cleaners, just to kind of help me out. I'll show you where I use those on these. But this is going to be a detailed breakdown, maintenance, reassembly video. So feel free to skip around this video if there's some stuff you don't need, because it is, like I said, it is going to be pretty detailed. Okay, now, what I want to do at this point, and my steel wool, almost forgot there. Alright, so what I'm going to do at this point is just start a basic field strip. So, I'm going to undo my screw here, my Forend cap screw. Now, when you do this, especially if you haven't had your gun apart before, don't let this thing just go flying off, because if, like I said, if you're inheriting a gun or something like that, the magazine tube retainer might not be in there. Like, a lot of people just, if they lose that, they'll just like smash the spring down with the cap and then tighten it down. So this comes off and then your spring will go flying out of this thing. Fortunately, that's not the case here. So you take off the cap. Once that cap's off, you can remove your barrel. Alright, and then we're going to go ahead and remove the trigger group, which is these two pins right here, 1 and 2. Doesn't matter which one you take out first. just get a set of punches here, and you shouldn't even need a hammer. You should just be able to knock it right out. I'll show you how these pins are actually retained a little bit later. And we just knock those right out. I got this bin here. I'm just going to throw them in my parts bin. And then from here, your trigger group will actually just lift right out, like so. And this is a perfect example, because look how absolutely filthy this thing is. So under normal circumstances, I would actually just take this, throw it in the ultrasonic tank, and not worry about it. But I understand that a lot of y'all out there don't have an ultrasonic tank, so we're going to do it the hard way, which it's not really that hard. It may be hard the first time you do it, but don't worry about it. You'll be able to figure it out, because I'm going to show you the step by step. All right, so once that's out, we can go ahead and remove our action assembly here with our bolt. So if you look on the inside of your 870 action, you have some interrupter latches. You have one on the left side and one on the right side. Okay. Now you're going to have to push these in to get your action bars past them. So push your bolt forward, and then you're going to push in on one side. So there we go. And if you look at the ejection port here, the opposite side, so no ejection port side, you're going to push that interrupter latch in, and you're going to push it in as far as you can as you pull the action bars forward, and that's going to allow everything to just kind of fall out. All right, so then your action bars come out, and then you have your bolt with the carrier piece on it as well. So this is just one solid piece. So we're just going to take this here, throw it in that parts bin. Now the bolt and the locking block just kind of floats on there. The locking block is held in by the firing pin that runs through it. You can kind of see it right through there. So in order to get all this apart, we need to take the firing pin out. And the firing pin is held in by this pin right here. Now, this pin has to come out from top to bottom. Don't try to drive it from the bottom. You have to drive it out of the top. And I think that was the right size I had. Yes, okay. So, you're going to need a hammer. And sometimes these are in there really stout, sometimes they're not. I'm actually going to see if I have a steel bench block here. Yeah, I do. So the steel bench block will make it a lot easier to drive out. So just line up the hole with the hole on the bench block, and we'll drive it out. Alright. And if you swing hard enough, you'll get your punch kind of stuck in there. But that's okay, that's what we have vices for. Alright, so when you pull your punch out, make sure you have your thumb on that firing pin, because it is going to want to come out. It's under spring tension. The firing pin will come out, and the spring will stay right in your locking block there. And then your locking block can then just lift and fall right out, because this little piece on the side and the firing pin are no longer keeping it in, so it can come right out. So we'll take that out, firing pin spring, and the retainer pin. And then now our bolt is almost stripped. The last thing we can take out is the extractor, plunger, and spring. So to take this out, all you have to do is pull back on the plunger, and you can use a small screwdriver for this as well. I'm just using a small punch. And this one's pretty stout, so it means it's probably really dirty. So I'm going to switch to a small screwdriver blade. And this is the Brownells Magnetip screwdriver set, specifically for gunsmithing. So yeah, we're going to pull back on this plunger. And then when you go back far enough, you'll be able to, so what we're going to do is we're going to push back on the plunger, and then this extractor goes in at an L shape, so it'll just kind of fall out. So I'm going to do it here. It's going to be really hard for me to do it and show you on camera at the same time. But once it's out, I can kind of show you how it's held in there. Let me actually just hold it in the vise. I'll get it out, then I'll show you how it was held in there. All right. And the thinner a bit you have for this, the easier it is going to be. Okay, so the way this was held in there, let me get the plunger and spring out. All right, so you have the spring, you have the plunger, and you have the extractor, and you see how you kind of have this shelf here. The plunger and spring were pushing back on this. I'll lose the spring here. The plunger was pushing back on this, so if you pull the plunger back, the extractor slides right out, just like so. And to put it in is way easier than taking it out. We'll just set this stuff aside. All right, and we'll actually go ahead and disassemble this forend. Most likely you won't have to disassemble your forend. I want to do it just in case, you know, those of you out there, if you have a bunch of rust in yours, then you need to take it apart and clean it. This one does not have any rust. This gun's well worn, but it's well taken care of. So I'll show you how to actually disassemble it. There's special tools for this. So this is the Brownells Remington 870 12 gauge tool. There's tools for 20 gauge. There's tools for other shotguns like Mossbergs, different things like that. So you do have to have the gun specific one. But you're just gonna insert it into this piece here that kind of looks like a castle nut from an AR-15. Very similar component. And this one was already loose, so good thing we checked it, because when we put it back on, we're going to make it a lot tighter than what it was. And you just unscrew it. And yes, I highly recommend having the tool if you're going to try this, because if you don't, you're most likely going to chew something up or damage it or something like that. And then once you have the nut off, you can just pull the stock off of the bars most of the time. And if yours doesn't want to budge, what you can do is put the nut back on just a thread or two and then give it a bump. And that'll help just knock it loose. Yeah, there we go. And then typically once you have it loose, knocked loose, you can pull it off. And if still not, you can grab one of the legs in your vise. Don't try to grab both of your legs, you're going to bend it. And just give it a pull, not doing anything too crazy here. And this one is a perfect example of one that is really tight. This is probably one of the tightest ones I've ever had to deal with. So what we're actually going to do is just kind of tap it loose here. Alright, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a nylon hammer and I'm going to very gently tap the back of this. And it's almost out. Also, another thing to note, I'm very gently tapping this with the nylon piece. If you want to protect your wood further, this one's not doing any damage at all or leaving any marks. But if you have something that you just refinished, you want to protect it further, just put a piece of leather on the back there. A thick piece of leather will do just great. going with the hammer. Alright, and you can see we're almost out of there, and it's a good thing we did take it off. The reason it's sticking so much is because of rust. So that wood and that rust have kind of fused together, and that's why it's so tight. So I am now very glad we're actually taking this thing apart. There we go. All right, and you can see that rust there. So we'll get that cleaned up as well. And the wood's in pretty good shape. I'm not really going to do anything to it. So I'm just going to set the wood aside as we go. All right, next thing to do to take it apart, and really the last thing to take it apart, is to remove the butt pad so that we can remove the stock. Now, we do make special screwdriver bits specifically for butt pads, and it's these long shaft round Phillips head bits, just like so. And what you need to do is just take a little bit of oil, spray it on your stock holes, or your butt pad holes, and lubricate. And the reason we do that is so that the steel of the screwdriver bit doesn't grab onto and try to tear the rubber of the butt pad. And I'm just going to unscrew these two wood screws here. And you can put a little bit of oil on these screws as well, especially if they're rusty. These aren't, so I'm not going to worry about it at all. Okay, now, you're not going to be able to see it on camera, but if you look deep down in there, there is a screw that undoes this. So different shotguns have used different types of screws, so if you just get a small flashlight and look down in there, you'll be able to see. Also, we also make some bits specific for it. So if you look, this is basically just a socket wrench that has a slotted adapter on it. So if you have a rusty screw, this will support that screw and help you break that screw loose. This is a great tool to have if you work on a lot of shotguns. But we're just going to check and see if this thing is tight or not. If it is tight, we'll come back and use that. If not, we'll just go with a regular screwdriver bit. And a full-size Brownells magnetip handle is about the perfect length to do this. I know you can't really see what I'm doing here, but I'm just turning a screwdriver. So just unscrew it. All right. And then your stock will come off. So your stock, bolts, and washers will also come out of there. They sit in there just like so. And you can see the slotted bit there. Alright, so we have our stock. We'll just set that aside with the butt pad. We're not going to do anything else with that. Also, this little metal plate sits in between your stock and receiver. So make sure you don't lose that. Alright, and also I'll point out, the stock was a little loose, and you can kind of see this hairline crack. So this is from the shotgun being shot with the stock too loose. So the stock will actually move around a little bit under recoil and can crack. So make sure your stock is nice and tight on your shotgun before you go out and do some shooting. It may not happen in one shot, it may not happen in 5 shots, but over time, this can definitely happen. And also the inverse can happen if it's just way too tight. If it's way too tight, there's all this stress and tension between the stock and the receiver, and it just takes a little bit of recoil to just blow that tension out of proportion essentially, and then cause some cracks. So don't like go crazy with it being super tight, but just make it nice and snug. You know, just turn it till you can't turn it anymore. You don't need to, it's not like a, you don't need to be like Larry Lobster or anything and just go crazy on it. But with that being said, that is the full disassembly. Nope, it's not. I missed a step. So this magazine tube, almost forgot about it. So we have this handy little corkscrew tool here. This is a spring clip type retainer that's in there. And all you're going to do is take your tool, push in, turn it just until it stops, right? So the corkscrews kind of just threaded in, if you will. And from here, we will point this thing away from our face and just work it out. Just pull and wiggle and it'll come right out. Now be careful because there's a spring behind this. All right, and it's gonna all kind of come apart here. So here's our limiting plug. That's what limits the amount of shots this tube will hold. So it's legal for hunting, depending on what kind of hunting you're doing. The spring will come out. And then the follower is behind that. And the follower will come right out. So I will note, this is an older Remington. On newer Remingtons, they actually have these dimples that are pressed into the magazine tube and then cuts in the retainer so that you have to line those up whenever you put it in and take it out. This is an older Remington, you don't have to worry about that. Okay. And then this is that retainer that I was talking about. It was in backwards. Technically, this is the correct way to put it in. Honestly, with function, it makes absolutely no difference which way you put it in. It doesn't matter. Somebody, being my dad, probably just put it in this way because it's the rounded side and it was easier to get in. But we'll put it back in the way it came from the factory when we reassemble it. And it just kind of goes on just like that. And then we put everything in and then we'll just press this back in place. But we'll get to that shortly after we cleaned it up. And the follower on this one is plastic. You can always upgrade to a metal one if you want. And that's back. So Remington, they all now come with orange high visibility followers. But this is an older one, so it was just a black piece of plastic. Okay, now we're ready to start cleaning some stuff. And before we do that, this trigger group is the worst of all of it. So we'll start here. I'm going to go ahead and completely, so this is a good timestamp in the video. I'm going to go ahead and completely disassemble, clean, and reassemble the trigger group so that it's kind of its own separate thing. So if you don't want to do the full disassembly and reassembly of this component, just go ahead and skip forward in the video. If you're watching this on YouTube or whatever, there'll be timestamps, so don't worry about it. So yeah, it's been a while since I've actually taken one of these apart, so let's go through it. All right, first thing I like to do is put it on fire. Then I'm going to put my thumb on the hammer and let it kind of come forward. All right. That way it relieves spring tension off of that hammer so I don't have something that's going to like break my finger if I do the wrong thing. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and get this carrier assembly. So your shell lifter, I'm going to go ahead and get that off of here. And when I do, this little spring right here with this plunger is going to want to like come flying off, so I just need to be mindful of that. Okay, so if you look at your trigger group, I'm going to move through this kind of fast, so feel free to like pause it and stop or slow down or whatever. The controls are on your end. Okay, so if you look, you have this little spring clip on one side of this, and the other side is completely empty. You're going to want to push out the only direction you can, so the spring clip side needs to come out. And what I like to do is just kind of take my hand, wrap it over like this. So I'm essentially making sure nothing's going to come flying off and like shoot off into the abyss, right? So I'm going to take it just like this. I'm going to take a punch that kind of fits the close diameter. And I'm going to use the punch to push it. And if you do this right, you can actually use the punch to replace that piece. So now this piece came off and stuff is just falling all over this table. Let me kind of clear you a sight line here. So that's the first piece that came off. And I'm just going to pull out my punch, and now this is going to want to come off of here. And when they're dirtier, things tend to stick. All right, so there's our lifter. We're gonna clean that just as it is. This piece that's on the back is riveted on, or it's like, yeah, that's a rivet. Yeah, so we're not gonna take that off because we'd have to get a new rivet and re-rivet it, which I don't want to do. The plunger and spring come off. All right, that's the lifter. So now that our lifter's off, we're just gonna go ahead and move to the back, because if you notice, the back piece has one of these tube pieces as well. And if you look in one side of it, you can see that retainer clip in there, kind of similar to the retainer clip on this smaller one. And what these little clips actually do, those are what retain your takedown pins. So when your pin goes through, it has that groove cut in it. When your pin goes through, it locks into that groove. So a big mistake people make when they take apart their trigger group is these pieces can rotate and come right off. They'll lose those pieces, put their shotgun back together, and then they wonder why their pins won't stay in. Well, it's because you lost the retainer. A 10-cent piece is now missing in the carpet of your home or whatever. And that's why your shotgun won't stay together. So just make sure you keep control of those pieces, because they are two different sizes as well, as you can see. Alright, let's see if I can... This one looks almost corroded into place, if you will, so I'm going to go up a size and punch here. And I'm going to give this one a little bit of a tap to persuade it. Yeah, there we go. So the good thing about this is these pin diameters, so that front one was actually a 1/4 inch, and then this one in the rear is a full 5/16, and they fit almost perfectly. All right, we'll take that off, remove this punch again, and then this piece, this punch is going to have our trigger and disconnector on it. So this disconnector spring is just kind of chilling between these two pieces, and there's really nothing holding it on. You could just like kind of take it right off. So I'm going to set that aside, and then the trigger is held in, and well, the disconnector tension was being added by that piece, that big drum we just took out, and then the trigger pin will come out. If you look at it, you have one side that's seemingly smaller than the other side because this pin is knurled. So drive it out small side to large side. I'll show you that knurling here. It's knurled just how our other pin that held our firing pin in, that was also a knurled pin. I was going to grab that to kind of show you, because these are the two knurled pins on this gun. Yep, here it is. And you can see that knurling on one side of it. So we'll set that aside. And when you pull this out, and then from here, we can maneuver the arm around and lift up, and the trigger will come out. So what this arm on the side actually does, so that when you fire, well, let me just say this. Under normal circumstances, your action is locked, and then you have to push this bar in to unlock your action. So you have to push up on this to run the action on your shotgun. But when you pull the trigger, it unlocks that, right? So when the hammer goes forward, these bars interact with each other to drop out of the way and let the actual slide operate. So that's why your trigger is connected to the rest of your carrier assembly, is because it needs to operate that way. That's how pulling the trigger unlocks the action. So from here, we have another pin, and I might actually just leave this one in. I should be able to clean up everything here, possibly. So if you notice, this pin is almost blind. You can see it kind of like stops at the hole right there. So you got to get in there if you want to take this one out with a really small punch. And it does not always want to come out easily. So we may actually just leave it in. And I think that's exactly what we're going to do. We're just going to clean around this. But if you wanted to take it out, I'll just go ahead and do it just to show you. You talked me into it, all right? So what we're going to do, come in at an angle with a punch that is much smaller than the pin we're hammering on, because you can see this is the punch size, that's the pin size, big difference there, just so we can kind of get around that corner. This pin shouldn't be too tight, so it shouldn't be terrible. Alright, and then the disconnector will come right out. And this pin's just kind of stuck in place right there. I'm just going to leave it there, to be honest with you. Okay, now the last thing to take out is the hammer assembly and the safety assembly. So the safety, you got to kind of be careful with, because there's just a ball detent in there that's holding it in place. All right, and when you knock the pin out for the safety, that thing's going to want to shoot off into who knows where. But this pin at the top right here has a spring underneath it, and then that goes down and pushes on a ball detent, and that holds the safety in. And this is another directional pin here. It is not in tight at all. I've never seen one in tight. And then just very carefully, spring comes out, tension comes off the safety. Safety can come out. And we'll just kind of push the detent. And it's just a basic ball detent. You can see it right there. And our hammer, depending on how tight this piece is in there, we might actually leave it in. Let me just check and see here. Yeah, that one's not going to move. So we are actually going to leave our hammer in the gun. I'm just double checking that decision here. Yeah, and I'll show you why here in just a second. Once we start cleaning. So from here we can just start cleaning up everything. What I like to do is take some Hoppe's number 9 in a dish. I don't have a dish handy, so I'm just going to use the lid for my stare-it punches. And this is just so I don't contaminate the rest of my number 9. And I'm going to take an acid brush and a rag, I suppose. And I'm just going to start painting this stuff on. And this will break up all that old grease and stuff. Like I said, the ultrasonic tank, you know, it makes a 30-minute job take like 5 minutes, because you can work on other stuff while it's cleaning. But all I'm going to do is paint Hoppe's number 9 on every piece here. Wipe it down real good, do every single piece, and then we'll jump right into the reassembly. So you don't need to sit here and watch me scrub all these pieces. I'll see you when we have all the parts clean. Alright, so we got the parts cleaned up. Just basically went over them with Hoppe's number 9, just as I said. And something I want to note here, like the discoloration and stuff on this old steel is perfectly fine. You just don't want a bunch of stuff caked up on it. That's what you want to try and scrub off. But a little bit, like I said, a little bit of discoloration's okay. And this gun functioned just fine. Like when we took it apart and you saw how dirty it was. So it's got a long ways to go before it needs another cleaning like that. Especially if we don't use some like anonymous like grease of unknown origin. Which we won't, so it'll be fine. Okay, so now with my clean parts, what I actually like to do to kind of just rehydrate the steel, if you will, is I'll take some rim oil and just put a coat of rim oil on all the parts, just like so. And then I'll just wipe off the excess. And like metal, steel, like in general is porous, so that oil will get in there. And for lack of a better term, just hydrate the metal. Okay, so let's start the reassembly process, just kind of as we kind of wipe this down. So first thing I like to do here is I'll go ahead and take my selector, and we'll go ahead and reinstall that. So on these older Remingtons, the selector will only work one way. You can't make a right-handed gun a left-handed gun, okay? On the newer ones, the hole, they actually have 2 holes in them, if I remember correctly, so that, or the hole is more centralized. As you can see, the hole on this one is not in the center. I don't remember exactly the setup they used, but the point I'm making here is that this only goes in one way. So we'll insert our selector, and for like a normal right-handed person, I think the red should be on the left-hand side. We'll take our detent, drop it into the top there, push it down. We'll take the pin, and I just like to get the pin started. Then I'll take my spring, doesn't matter which direction the spring goes in. And what I'll need to do at this point is take a punch, push down on the spring, and then push our pin in. And then just tap it flush. And then your selector's back in. You would know if you didn't do it right because it'll be sticking out like way too far one side if you did it reverse. But this looks correct, so fortunately we put everything in the right side. As a primarily left-handed shooter for long guns, I get that mixed up quite a bit. But that's okay. So now we're just going to basically go through the reverse order of everything we just did and put it all back together. Okay, so what I will do, just make sure, no, I didn't put anything in there. Okay. Alright, so we have our disconnector. And the disconnector, if you notice, you have this little hook on one side and then a long path. And then you have this other side that has a bunch of stuff on it. So what you want to do is take that flat side with the hook on the top, put it in, because when your hammer is cocked back, this is what's actually going to grab onto your hammer. You can kind of see how it would interface right there. But we'll put that in. And just line up the hole with that pin that's still inside. And drive it in. Just like so. And it should move kind of freely, just like that right there. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and take our trigger. I'm going to drop it in there. Alright, so now we can take our trigger pin, and it's going to go in just how it came out. Remember, this is a knurled pin, so you got to put the smooth side in first. And we will put that in flush. There we go. Alright, great. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the disconnector spring, which is also the trigger spring, and we're going to sandwich that between the trigger and the disconnector like that. So if you look, there's this little nub on the front of the trigger here, and then another on the back of the disconnector. Those are just going to press against, or go on the inside diameter of the spring, just like that. And you remember this drum piece here. This is actually just a bushing for your takedown pin. So we want that spring clip. Notice on this back piece here, the spring clip can only go on one side. We want that spring clip to be on the side that's recessed for it. So you can see there's a recess cut in here, but not on this side. All right, so if you try to put it in from this side, you'll be able to get it in, but you're not going to be able to get the trigger group back in the gun. So it goes in this side. And because this trigger is now under tension, you'll need to pull it out of the way. And you can just reach up and grab it and pull it to get the bushing in. And we'll push it in all the way. And now that's reinstalled. Nice and easy. Okay, and then for the last thing, to put this trigger group back together, all we need to do is take our lifter. We'll wipe it down here. And we'll kind of get it somewhat positioned where it needs to be. Notice you have this leg on the side here. It's just going to go right in. You shouldn't have to really force anything. It should just kind of naturally flow into this spot right here. And then before you seat it all the way, you'll know that you'll have this little flap that wants to come up too. Just line up the holes. Before you seat it all the way, you need to reinstall that spring and detent. So we'll move it forward. Spring and detent go in just like so. And now is the tricky part, because you have to push this spring and detent in while you line up the holes. And we'll do just that. All right, now the great thing about the front bushing is that it's not directional. It can go in either direction, but I do like to try and put the spring clip on the same side as the one in the rear. That's really just personal preference more than anything. And we will just try to line everything up. You can use a punch to help you out as well, which I might do in this case. All right, so one quick note, when you reassemble this, this trigger group here, just make sure that this piece that's attached to the trigger is on top of this piece that's attached to your lifter or your carrier. So the trigger piece needs to be on top of the carrier piece. Okay, so once you have all this reassembled, just make sure when you cock the hammer it stays cocked. We'll do the full function check once the gun's reassembled and worry about it from there. Okay. So now that that's clean, the rest of the components will go pretty easy. So the next thing to clean, or the biggest thing to clean, is going to be the inside of your receiver. Honestly, for this, do the same thing. Just take a brush and some Hoppe's number 9, and just brush out the inside of the receiver. Now, I will also note, be very careful whenever you stick your hands inside of this receiver, because you're going to want to wipe it out with a rag and stuff like that, which is perfectly fine. I do that as well. But the guide rails inside of this thing, especially if you have an older gun, those are going to be razor sharp, because that action sliding across them over time has just created like 2 razor blades in there, basically. And they will cut you very badly, and I'm speaking on that from experience. I have bled quite a bit inside of Remington guns. Alright. And this goes a little bit faster if you have an air chuck. You can just spray some compressed air in there to blow all this junk out once you have it broken up with the Hoppe's. And then I do the same thing again with the rim oil. And then when we do the final reassembly, that's whenever I'll start adding some of that Wilson grease in there. So you'll see that. Alright, and then a part that gets pretty neglected that a lot of people forget to clean is going to be the magazine tube. And we can actually just use... well, actually, the first thing to do is just look down at see how dirty it is. This one's pretty dirty. I'm actually just going to use my barrel cleaning brush for this. It's not going to be a very tight fit, or at least it shouldn't be. No, it's not. Alright, yeah, that's going to be good. And I'll just spray a little bit of rim oil. Alright. And usually these aren't very dirty. I'll take that back. They usually get pretty dirty, but the dirt isn't really stuck in there like they would be a barrel. It's just usually like dust and stuff that gets in here. Yeah, that looks super clean just from that very light pass there. And that's all you got to do with your mag tube. That's it. It's clean. And really, our receiver in general, that's it. It is cleaned up. I'm going to clean a little bit more around this ejector, which the ejector is that piece in there. It's riveted in, so you don't have to worry about taking that out. And this one's worn enough, you can actually very faintly see the rivets on the other side right there. And I have some canned air, so I'm going to try and blow just a little bit of this extra stuff out of here. Just like so. Alright, great. Receiver's done. So that makes the receiver and the trigger group complete. And it only gets easier from here. Now the bolts, as you can see, this is a very well used shotgun, and these bolts stay relatively clean. So I'm not even really going to scrub this one. I'm just going to wipe it down with the rag. I'm just going to run the rag through the middle piece here. Yeah, and that's really all you got to do with that. Same thing with the carrier piece here. Just wipe that down. Same thing with the locking block. And these parts are made out of some pretty dang hard metal, so they tend to not rust very easy at all. The firing pin. And firing pin, you just want to inspect that for any missing chunks, bends, breaks, chipped pieces. And if you have any of that, replace it. Firing pins almost never break. Alright, same thing, we'll just wipe that down. Firing pin spring. Same thing, if you have any, if it looks broken, anything like that, go ahead and replace that as well. Alright, and we'll just go ahead and do everything here. Alright, so let's go ahead. Now's a good time to talk about rust removal, because that's really the only thing we have to do with this piece here. I'm just going to spray some Rem oil on it. Take my quadruple aught steel wool, wherever I have placed it, right here. And just scrub that rust off with it here. Wipe it off. And you can see the raw metal under there because that rust just took that bluing right off, but that's okay. As long as we keep this nice and hydrated, we won't have to worry about getting rust on there again. What I'll probably do is, before I put this back on the wood, I'll spray a little bit more Rem oil on there, just kind of saturate it, and then put it back on the wood, and it'll probably never rust again. Keeping in mind that this gun was used, this gun spent its entire life before it came up here to Iowa in South Louisiana, so it was in some pretty challenging place as far as rust is concerned. And I'm just kind of picking at stuff and cleaning up these action bars here. There's some actual grease stuck inside of it. There's supposed to be a hole there, and I looked down and it was solid. It was just a bunch of grease crammed in there. Old grease. The inside of this we can pretty much just clean the same exact way. Yeah. Put a brush on there. Rem oil. Remove the brush, put the mop on. And that looks pretty good. Alright. I'm just going to go ahead and reassemble this assembly. Alright, some Rem oil. Put the wood back on. Get it kind of close to lined up. And then I'll probably just tap this back on opposite of how I took it off. When you're doing that, you just want to make sure that your action bars are lining up at least close. This is close enough for now. Make sure your tool continues to clear the wood, which it is. That's good. This is not what this tool is made for. I'm just using it to help me get a little bit of reach on here. And I'm going to have to rotate these somehow here. we go. And that is the sound of it bottoming out. Now we take this castle nut-like piece. We'll do the same thing. We'll just wipe it down. And thread it right back on, making sure we have oil on those threads there. I'll just add just a little more. Alright, and that's just to prevent future rust. Using our tool, we'll reinstall it. And put it on there nice and snug. Alright, that's the action bar assembly done. What I'll actually do real quick is just go back to the outside of this receiver and use that same rust fighting technique here. Just knocking off that surface rust. And wiping down the outside. That's all you need to do right there. Perfect. Alright, now we need to do that same exact thing to the barrel. So what I'll actually do, for the barrel I'll just start with the outside, then we'll clean the inside. I'm going pretty heavy on the oil because I'm trying to get some underneath that rib, that vent rib. So the rib is this piece on top. It's called a vent rib because it's ventilated. It's not solid. And I will just rub the steel wool all over this barrel here. I'm not trying to pull all the rust out. I'm just trying to knock off the high spots of the rust and also get as much of that oil as I can into the rust to neutralize it so it doesn't continue to spread. And that's all I'm doing. Nice and easy. Get the top of that rib too. The front sight on this gun is in really great shape. I thought I was going to have to replace it, but I do not. It is in excellent condition. So most shotguns, the beads are threaded in. On some Remingtons, they are threaded in. But unfortunately, on a lot of Remingtons, for whatever reason, they press them in. So the only way to really replace it, or the most economical way to replace it, is to file it off flat and drill and tap a hole behind it. Because there's usually not enough room in front of it. And that's really the easiest way to do it. And it works just fine. So if you need to replace a bead, that would be the way to do it. Alright, so went over the whole thing with my quadruple lot steel wool and some rim oil. Now I'm just wiping off a bunch of the just gunk, dirt, old rust, or whatever. And then for getting underneath that vent rib, I'll just use a pipe cleaner. The back's a little tricky here. We'll just go to the one in front of that now. And typically there's like years of just stuff underneath these ribs. And you're most likely not going to be able to get it all out. Just get as much out as you can. A lot of times there's like surface rust under there also. You just want to get some oil into that rust to neutralize it. You're not necessarily trying to take it all out. But what I'm doing right now is really all you need to do. You can be as thorough or as casual as you want with this step, really. Personal preference. And that is the outside of the barrel. This gun has a fixed choke built into it. If you have an interchangeable choke, just take out your choke tube and clean that as well in similar fashion that we've been doing everything else. Alright, so now let's clean the barrel. I'm going to take my brush, I'm going to dip it in my hoppies, and I'm going to scrub the barrel. And this is kind of like a as needed procedure. There's no like perfect number of stroke amounts and stuff like that. Just do it as needed. I'll just run it through on average like 5 or 6 times. Then switch to either a patch or a bore mop like I'm using here just to make things a little easier. And then look down the barrel and repeat if you need to. So a lot of times what you'll actually see, of course you'll see some carbon fouling from the gunpowder that burned, but you'll also see plastic fouling out at the end towards the choke, where the plastic from the choke just kind of starts to embed itself in the barrel over time. And you want to clean that out as well, because that can affect your pattern. And that looks pretty good. There are some small spots of pitting inside of this barrel, but for the most part it's in really good shape. So that looks pretty good. So we got some oil in the barrel, neutralized what rust was there. But the chamber and the choke tube area are the two most important spots, and those look great. Okay, so the other components we need to clean are cap here. Again, we just clean that same way we've been cleaning everything else. I'll use the used acid brush here. And if there's rust on this, you can use some steel wool. We don't need it. Just going to clean it out. That part's good to go. And then from here, we're just kind of cleaning up some other smaller pieces like the follower. The followers get disgusting. You can see here. So, in same fashion as everything else, we'll just clean it up. And these plastic followers, if they get too worn, they can actually lock up your action, especially on the Remington like 1100s and 1187s. And when that happens, it can happen on an 870, but it's very rare that it does. This one's a perfect example because it's super old and it's nowhere near locking up. But what happens is these caps or these followers will get worn out, then they'll stick out just a little bit too far into the receiver, and then your interrupter latches can't go anywhere, and it causes your action to just lock up solid. You can't run your action at all. So then I'd recommend upgrading. If you have an 1100 or 1187 of any sort, I'd recommend upgrading to an aluminum follower. And the 870s take the same as those guns, so you could put those in 870s as well. Alright, we have the plug, which is just a piece of plastic. You can just wipe it down, it doesn't really matter much. We have our stock screw. This one's in pretty good shape. I'll just kind of hydrate it and not even really wipe it down. I'll just put it back into the gun like that. And then our mag tube spring. This is one of those things you just wipe down, check for any breaks, kinks, anything like that. And if yours is like super rusty, go ahead and replace it, because rusty springs are not good springs. The retainer has in pretty good shape. Takedown pins are in great shape. The spacer that goes between the stock and the receiver, I'll just kind of wipe that down. Alright, now we have our firing pin, we have our extractor spring, and detent. Those are the only parts left in this little bin. So we'll go ahead and reinstall those after I just kind of wipe them off here. These usually don't get too dirty, just like your bolt. Alright, so we have the Remington extractor detent. So this is an older one. So one end of this detent is rounded, the other end is more flat. All of the newer Remingtons, I say newer, pretty much any gun made after this one, both sides are rounded. So they're not directional. This one is directional. Okay, let's actually just go ahead and put those parts back in. Oh, also, if you want, you can put a little bit of hoppies on a pipe cleaner and run it down that channel. And just clean that out. And you can see that that actually did something. Then I'll use the dry end, kind of clean up. Rim oil it up a bit. Probably use the dry end again. Okay, that's looking pretty good. All right, so now this is where the actual good oil will come into place. Not that the rim oil is not good. I use rim oil to hydrate stuff. I don't really use it for actually lubricating. I like a thicker oil for that. So I'll just put a little bit on the spring here. Just a little bit goes a long way. Insert the spring into the bolt. I'll take my detent with the curved end facing out. And I'll actually just rub some of this grease all over this detent. Then I'll put it into the hole. Then with the extractor, I'll just kind of rub some grease on the back of that. Now, to put the extractor back in, just make sure your claw is facing the right direction, so where the rim of the shell would be. And you're just going to push in and then push down, and it'll snap into place. Very easy, simple to install design here that I am not demonstrating well because my hands are all greasy. If you have greasy fingers like me, you can use a tool to help you out here. So we're going to push this in. Actually, let me do this in the vise so that'll free up a hand so you can actually see what's going on rather than me just tell you about it. Alright, so put the extractor in and you can just kind of push on that front surface and it hooks down and in just like that. Make sure it springs back and forth and it's installed. It's just that easy. Okay, bolts, or excuse me, locking block and firing pin. We'll install all of those together. I'll just put a little bit of grease, rub it all over that firing pin. Alright, same thing with the spring. I'll just kind of rub it on the outside. Locking block, just a very light coat all around. Alright, so now notice you have this little roll pin sticking out the side of your locking block. That's going to go into this channel that's cut right here. So it's going to drop in just like that. Only goes in one way. Nice and easy. Now your spring, just take your spring and lay it down in there like that. Then you're going to take your firing pin, push it in from the back. You're going to thread that spring, so go through the middle of the spring, and you'll have to kind of move your locking block around to get the firing pin all the way in, but you're going to go all the way through, and it's going to want to notice you have that middle portion on the firing pin to stop the spring, so it kind of wants to jump around. But I'm trying to show you here, but if I just take my thumb, put it in there, it helps stop that spring from jumping around. I know that doesn't look great on camera, but I just use my thumb to kind of hold it and push in. Alright, so now we need to reposition the back of this firing pin so that the retainer pin will hold it in. So what I'm actually going to do is, while I'm holding it by hand, I have no idea which direction clockwise that firing pin is facing, but that's okay. I'm going to take my retainer, push it in, and the firing pin has a cut in the back of it. And wouldn't you know it, it was actually facing the right direction. But what I would do is I would put tension on this piece here and then just rotate that firing pin until it fell into place. But you can see that it's retained. It should stick out the back a little bit so the hammer has some room to hit it. And then your pin is still sticking out, so you just need to hammer that flush. So what we'll do is we'll take a hammer. I'll use this heavy duty bench block again. Take a hammer and a punch, and I'm just going to hammer it flush. And just like that, you should be able to run your finger across and not feel it protruding. So that's perfect. Firing pin moves back and forth. That's great. Okay, cool. So now the bolt just kind of rests on the carrier. If you notice, one side of your carrier has a U-shaped cut in it. That's clearance for your hammer when it comes forward to smack your firing pin, so it goes the same direction as your firing pin, just like that. But you see all these high wear surfaces on that carrier? We're going to throw some oil on there. I know I've been calling this oil and grease. It's a thick oil, so oil, grease, whatever. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. And let's just kind of continue reassembly here. Let's go ahead and throw the stock on. I have my plate piece. Doesn't matter which direction this goes, it's not directional. Just slide it on the back. Take your stock, position it on the rear, make yourself a little room to work here. Alright, so my screw, or my stock bolt, I'm just going to insert that in the back. Take my screwdriver, fish around and find the slot there. Actually, I'll just throw this in the vise, make things a little easier. And we'll just thread this back on. Nice and tight. So what I like to say is, typically as tight as you can get it with a screwdriver without having to put some kind of bar on there and tighten it is usually good enough. And then, you know, every year before hunting season or whatever, just pull off your butt pad and just make sure that screw's still tight. Okay, speaking of butt pad, it is on this table right here. Alright, and I'll just put just a little bit of oil on this screw here, and this is for no other reason than to just kind of help it prevent it from rusting, but not so much that it's going to swell the wood, you know. So you kind of want to avoid that. And stock screw, reapply some oil to that. And when you're installing this here and taking it out, work these screws back and forth. Don't do one screw all at once, because you can actually snap the base of your recoil pad. And just make sure your recoil pad is lining up as you tighten it down with the rest of the stock. Alright, stock's back on the gun. And let's put that magazine tube back together real quick here. Alright, so what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to use another oil here. What do I have? Yes, so some dry lube. I like to use a dry lube in the magazine tube. So we'll just put some on the spring. I'll even spray some on the follower. And then I'll spray some into the tube itself. Alright, then I'll drop my follower in. Once the follower's in there, I'll follow that with the spring, the plug. Alright, and then now I will position our tool on here. Not too tight though, because this needs to collapse to go in. So we'll just position it and just kind of work it into place here. And this one has spent its entire life in the other direction, so it doesn't necessarily want to go easy, but that's all right. There we go. And we'll push until it's below the surface. Just like that. I'll show you here. That's how that should look. Okay, now let's put the rest of this gun together. Okay, so I have my bolts and carrier assembly, all that stuff. I have my action bars. What I'm going to do, I'm going to lubricate the top, sides, bottom, and inside of my action bars. I'm going to set my bolts on, and I'm just going to kind of pinch the front here so that these don't spread apart and drop my bolt through the middle. I'm going to insert it, slide it on the tube, get it started, and if you notice, you hit a dead end. You can't put it on any further. What you have to do is reach inside and push those interrupter latches again. And those interrupter latches, they just tell the shell when it can and when it can't come out of the tube. And they do that by interfacing with the action bar, but they'll also stop your action bar from going in. So push your ejection port side first, it'll drop back a little bit, then push the opposite side second, and it'll drop in the rest of the way. If you've never done it before, it's going to take you a little bit longer than what I just did. You might have to fumble with it a little bit, but that's okay. That's perfectly fine. So once this is on, we'll go ahead and throw our trigger group in. So the trigger group, what we'll do is throw some oil on the front of that hammer. That's where the bolt rides against it. On that carrier latch piece, or carrier dog, I should say. We'll throw a little bit on the plunger as well. And the back right there, and then you can just push your hammer down. That'll get it all up in your disconnector. And then the lock right there. That's what tells your action bars that it can't move back. That piece right there. Okay, so now we're just gonna gently work this into the receiver It may take a little bit of playing with to get it to seat. Just like so. So what you're going to want to do is start with the front and just work the back in. And make sure your safety's on so you don't accidentally pull the trigger here and get your hammer forward. But just work it in until it seats just like that. Take your pins and put them in. Remember what side that retaining clip was on? I put both of mine on that side, right? So we'll push in from this side. That way we only have to go through the clip once rather than twice. Right there. All right, great. Now let's put the barrel on. And what I'll do, so this is where the locking block interfaces with your barrel here. I'll just put a little bit of oil in that. Put the barrel on. The retainer cap, we'll tighten that down all the way. Make sure your retainer cap is tight, because if you shoot and this retainer is loose and this barrel's loose in here, you could break that ejector, and that ejector, like I said, is riveted in, so it's not an easy fix. Alright, so from here we can just do a quick function check. What you're going to want to do, take your gun, put it on fire, or actually we'll start on safe. Put it on safe. Nothing should happen when you pull the trigger. Put it on fire. Trigger should pull, and that will unlock your action. So you can recock it and repeat. Alright, and then from there, what we'll do, we'll check our latch there. Alright, so that's fine. And that's all there is to it. So, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that about, cleaning up an old gun, maybe you inherited it, whatever, maybe you bought one, got a good deal on one. But if you have any questions, or you want to see us do anything else that's different in the future, as far as different firearm platforms in this similar format, let us know in the comments down below. As always, if you need help with anything for any reason ever, feel free to give us a call on the tech line. We'll be happy to help you out. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.